Hello and welcome to ATI 4448. In this session, we are going to address project cost management to address the cost estimation. How are we going to estimate the cost for project activities and how to estimate the total project budget or project cost. So let's understand first what do we mean by the word cost. Cost is the monetary value of the material of a material or service labor required to produce something. While cost management, it includes the processes that's involved in estimating, budgeting, and controlling costs so that the project can be completed within the approved budget. And that is a definition provided by the project management institution through their guide BM book. So the three processes in project cost management are the cost estimation, the determining the budget, and then controlling the cost during the execution of the project. So for cost estimation, it's the process of developing an estimation of the monetary resources needed to complete project activities. While for determining the budget, it's the process of aggregating the estimated cost that we did in the first process or the first phase um, of the individual activities or work packages to establish the authorized cost baseline for the total project. Once we determine the budget and we have the cost estimate for each activities, then we start executing the project with the control of that cost. So controlling the cost will be the process of monitoring the status of the project to update the project budget and managing changes to the cost baseline, whether through weekly reports or whether by comparing baseline versus the actual of the expenditure or the cost of each activity. In small projects, actually, cost estimation and cost budgeting processes are so slightly different, so you can merge them together and can be viewed as one process. Once we start with the looking at the activities and having the work breakdown structure, we start developing a cost management plan to address or to estimate these activities or the cost for each activity. The cost management plan can establish the following. First of all, we will have level of accuracy by rounding data to prescribed precision, certain precision. We want it to be within a certain range and within certain accuracy. And then we identify the different units of measure that we are going to use for the project, whether we are going to use staff hours or staff days, maybe dollar amount. It depends on the organization policy or the project manager policy, but at the end it has to be a certain unit that is unified through the whole project. And then of course the organizational procedure which links the work breakdown structure activity and their cost to the accounting system. Actually, we are getting all the information from the main accounting system of the company or the organization, whether we have a certain average for the labor hour or staff hour or staff days, or we can actually have a certain amount of dollar for the activity itself. So it depends on the procedures and the rules and policies of the organization. Then we need to specify variance threshold for monitoring cost performance. It should be within a certain range. After that or beyond that is not acceptable. Beyond that is not acceptable. So that will be the threshold, and based on that, I will trigger an alert or alarm to act upon the changes or the problem that happen if exceeded that variance. And then we have rules of performance measurements. So I have to measure the actual expenditure versus the estimated cost, and that will give me performance measurement. Then we define the reporting format and frequency. How often would you like to see a report about the finance or financial status of the project, the cost of the project, and what are what's the format of that report. Sometimes it will be an Excel sheet, sometimes it will be in a Word document, sometimes it will be in a table. It's not preferable to be in paragraphs or written because the management will not be able to read like 20 pages of documentation, while they can review charts, they can review tables, they can review graphs that will represent the different performance measures for project expenditure. And then, of course, document the description for each cost management process. So let's start with the first process, the cost estimation, which we said before that it is the process of developing an approximation of the monetary resources needed to complete project activities. We know that cost estimates are predictions based on the information available at a given point in time. So at the beginning of the project, maybe you will not have enough information to make good prediction or a good cost estimation, but as project advances, we'll get more information and it will be more accurate. It will include also the consideration of costing for alternatives to initiate and complete a project. Maybe one of the things that we need to consider is the buy or lease for a certain equipment or a certain maybe the lease of a building facility or the buy for that facility. So it depends on the alternatives, different alternatives that I need to either start a project or at least complete the project. It also includes the cost of trade-offs and risks. The cost estimates are generally expressed in units of accuracy, in some instances in staff hours or staff days. Other instances might be in dollar amount. Sometimes it's in weeks. So it depends on like I said before, it depends on the management requirements, maybe the preferable value or unit that's been used by the customer or some of the stakeholders in the project. All estimates will be refined during project execution as more information and details became available, and then the accuracy of the estimates will increase as the project progresses through the project life cycle. Costs are estimates for all resources that will be charged to the project, such as labor, material, equipment, services, and facilities that's needed to accomplish a certain task. So to estimate the cost, I need actually to provide a complete definition of the work to be done, which is project scope. We need to develop and construct the logic network diagram, which we learned in the previous session. And then we need to construct the work breakdown structure and estimate the activities, different activities, time, and of course, we start adding the cost as we go, and review the time and cost with respective functional manager. Sometimes we review it with the customer to make sure that we are on the right track. And then we develop a project schedule to start the execution of the project in addition to a resource requirements plan. Then we identify the organizational assets to see if I have all the skills in-house, or do I need to contract other people from outside or other companies from outside to accomplish that project. Including will be the risk analysis, where we identify the risks and the cost associated with each risk or uncertainty. What are the tools and techniques that we use in cost estimation? We have the expert judgment, we have the analogous estimation, we have the parametric estimation, bottom-up estimation, the three-point estimates, reserve analysis, cost of quality, project management estimation software, and vendor bid analysis. As you can see, most of these are being repeated from time, so most likely you can use the time techniques to the cost techniques. And we'll go over each one of them separately. So for the expert judgment, actually it's guided by historical data, which can provide a good cost estimate for the expert. If the expert judgment cannot provide a cost estimate, it can recommend the proper tool or method to estimate the cost. So maybe they can use different technique or method to estimate that cost. In the analogous estimation, this method uses the values and parameters of measures of scale from previous similar projects as basis for cost estimation. It is used when there is a limited amount of information about the project. We don't have enough information to estimate the cost, so most likely I will look at the similar projects or similar activities that's been done before by the company or the organization, and can give a rough magnitude estimate for the cost of each activity. It can use historical data in addition to the expert judgment. In this estimation, it's less costly because I'm just looking at the different projects. But imagine if you want to go through hundreds of projects that's been done by the organization just to recognize one of the activities that's been done before, and how much would it cost. That's a time-consuming process, but it's a valid technique. In the parametric estimation, it uses a statistical relationship between historical data and other variables. So it can be applied to all project activities or to part of the project activities in conjunction with other estimation tool. For example, if I have 3 or 4 activities being identified, or the cost has been estimated using these techniques, then another 2 or 3 activities using the analogous, and then another 5 using expert judgment, and so on. So we can separate the different activities or cost of these activities based on the applicable tool or techniques that will be available for us, and based on the information for that activity. This method can produce higher level of accuracy based on the given historical data. If we have enough historical data enough and accurate historical data, then it will be with a high accuracy in the prediction or the estimation of the cost for a certain activity. For the bottom-up estimation, it's a method requires the greatest level of details for the work breakdown, packages or activities in the work breakdown structure. That means I have to break the activities into sub-activities and sub-activities and so on, until I reach to a work package, which is a small one that will identify the different resources, equipment, material needed to accomplish such a small activity or a work package. And then we roll up to a higher level with the cost to estimate the top level activities, and to get the total project cost. The accuracy of this estimation depends upon the complexity and level of details for project activities. And we are going to look at the different problems that will happen from that, especially when you have a complex, large project. For the 3-point estimation, the estimation can be improved if uncertainty and risk were taken into consideration. In the 3-point estimation, we use 3 estimates to define an approximation range for an activity's cost. And we did that also in the time where we had the most likely time duration. Now here we have the most likely cost for an activity, and the optimistic cost and the pessimistic cost. And the same formula, but instead of using the time, we are using the cost here. So the estimated cost will equal to the optimistic cost plus 4 times the most likely cost plus the pessimistic cost, all divided by 6. As an example of that, we have 2 tasks, task A, task B. We have the optimistic estimate for task A as $138 per hour. The most likely is $142 per hour. The pessimistic is $155 per hour. The expected estimate will be 143.5. How did we get that? We added the optimistic plus 4 times the most likely plus the pessimistic divided all by 6, and we'll get this number. And the formula is shown above. Then we can get the standard deviation, which is equal to the pessimistic minus the optimistic divided by 6, which is, in this case, the range will be 2.83, $2.83. The same for activity B. We can get the expected by using the formula and having the different values, and the standard deviation will be $3 per hour. Another method is the reserve analysis, and in this method it adds an allowance to the activity cost to account for cost uncertainty. As if you have a reserve money, an additional money that's been added to each activity. So if the cost of an activity is $10,000, we can make it 11,000 to make sure that we will be within range. Of course, there is a certain percentage where it can be acceptable, and a certain percentage where it cannot be acceptable and exceeds the limit. Having the reserve, if you want to be conservative and add a lot of reserve, then that might affect the total project budget, and that might affect the acceptance of that project by the management. So actually you have to be careful when adding or doing the reserve analysis to make sure that the allowance is an acceptable number or percentage that can be added to the cost of each activity. And of course, as more information becomes available, the allowance could be either used, reduced, or eliminated. Hopefully you don't want to use it. Hopefully you can eliminate it, but most of the time it's reduced, and you can use just half of it, or maybe eliminate and actually be lucky and not spend anything of that allowance. Another method is the cost of quality, and in this method it takes into consideration the money spent during the project to avoid failure, in addition to the money spent during and after the project because of failure. So we are taking all consideration for preventive failure and the internal and external failure if happened. Another method is the project management estimation software. So instead of using the different techniques, we can just use a software that will be computerized, such as spreadsheets, simulation, or statistical tools, or we can actually use both or two or three, all three of them, to assist in estimating the cost for the different activities. It can, of course, simplify the use of cost estimation techniques and facilitate the consideration of other cost alternatives. Once you have the time to do that, then you will have different alternatives to consider or cost to consider. And then we have the vendor bid analysis as a method, which is estimating the cost based on responsive bids from qualified vendors. Additional cost estimate analysis may be required by the project team to make sure that the estimated cost that was given by the vendor is acceptable and within range for the organization. Once I finish the estimation, I will be done with actually deciding what course of action to take. We establish the acceptable cost for each activity, then review the base cost with the customer or the sponsor or the customer to make sure that it's acceptable, then identify the indirect costs associated with project activities or define a certain percentage for the overhead. You know, some companies would like to add just a 20% for their overhead and administrative cost, and some companies would like to separate it and add a certain number for the whole project. Then we develop a pricing for the project, a cost report, and document this in the project file, which can be provided for the management. Typical problem with cost estimation, and this is what I told you about the complexity of the project. If you are estimating cost for large projects and you require lots of details and breakdown for these activities, then through the different levels of estimation for the cost, an error might happen. Also, people who developed estimates often do not have much experience or may have not, those people may lack experience, which will make the estimate have a certain range of error. And then we have the biasness of the human being towards the underestimation of certain activities or cost of activities. And the management might ask for an estimate, but really desire a bid to win a major contract or get internal funding. Then at that point, they might lower the price down, which might affect the different cost of activities and the project budget just to compete with other companies. The second process is to determine the budget, the project budget, and it is the process of aggregating the estimated cost of individual activities to establish the authorized project budget. The authorized budget does not include management reserves, and the authorized budget will be used to measure project cost performance. The requirements to determine the authorized budget is the activity cost estimates, the basis of estimates, scope baseline, project schedule, resource calendar, contracts, and organizational assets to know what's available and how much would it cost. The different tools and techniques to determine budget: we have the cost aggregation, the reserve analysis, the expert judgment, the historical relationships, and the funding limit reconciliation. For the cost aggregation, it's using the work breakdown structure to estimate for higher activities level and for the entire project. So we are actually collecting the different small costs within certain process or within certain activities of the sub activities and determining the higher level cost, which will lead to entire project budget and cost. Then we have the reserve analysis, which is using budget reserve analysis that can establish both the contingency reserve and the management reserve for a project. And then we have the expert judgment, which is providing basis upon expertise in an application area. This should be area. Knowledge area, discipline, or industry. And we have the historical relationships, where we can use that to develop a mathematical model to predict total project cost. Having the different factors, different analysis, and different values, we can develop the mathematical cost, which will assist in similar projects in the future. And then funding limits reconciliation, which is the expenditure of funds that should be within the limits of funds for the project. That will be all for this session. If you have any questions, please email it through Florida Online. Thank you.